Hello and welcome to another episode of Packaging Perspectives by Sustainable Packaging News. Whether you're tuning in at home, on the road or in your various workplaces or spaces, thank you for listening and for watching today. I'm Talia, I'm the ESG Director for Sabic Corporation Europe. We are a designer and manufacturer of paperboard, pulp and plastic food packaging. This video today was made possible by ATS-Tanner, modelled lovely in our set today. Some fantastic products here. Thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you. So ATS-Tanner stands for Precise, Reliable and Sustainable Banding Solutions for Sales Packaging and Packaging Logistics. With a strong focus on quality and innovation, ATS-Tanner help you to bundle and secure your products efficiently and responsibly. Their holistic approach combines expert advice, advanced machines, high quality materials and dependable service, ensuring you always get the right packaging solution for your needs. Thank you so much, ATS-Tanner. Great to have you alongside with us today. So today's episode is called The Future of Sustainable Packaging. What's next? Sustainable packaging is a hot topic, one that the three of us are all very deeply involved in. So I'm really excited to get into some details about how you both see the future of sustainable packaging. But first, to introduce you both, today I have with me Kevin Vyse, who is Director of Sustainability for ProAmpac Europe, specialising in circular economy strategies within the packaging and plastics sector. You're a fellow of the Institute of Materials, Minerals and Mining, focusing on improving recyclability, reducing environmental impact and aligning products with evolving regulatory and industry standards. And then we have also Richard, your technical manager at RECOUP, where you provide guidance and testing services for members, including sorting trials and lab testing. With a strong background in infrared spectroscopy, you use your knowledge to advise how materials are identified and how they behave through the sorting process. Thank you so much for being here today. So, future sustainable packaging. First and foremost, when we talk about future of sustainable packaging, I think we very quickly go to the idea of new and novel materials. So my first question to you both is the future of sustainable packaging in novel materials? Kevin, why don't you kick us off?
Oh, that is, an open-ended question and a very undefined question.
Thank you.
I think when people think about materials and they think about, we'll invent a brand new material. The history of packaging shows that we very rarely invent a brand new material. We tend to have worked with materials we've had before in different combinations. So I think in its purest form, is not going to be a magical material that's plucked out of the air. There's going to be something that's a hybrid from something we've already had. Quite how that works, it's yet to be seen. I think, however, AI might play a part in that and looking for the connections that we haven't yet spotted. Who knows? But I do think it's a hybrid. It's going to be a hybrid rather than a brand new thing.
Okay, so when we're looking at, there are new materials coming onto the market that are trying to solve specific problems like non-chemically modified polymers to be able to work with the SUPD in Europe. Do you not see that? Do you see that as a hybrid solution then rather than one that is genuinely a novel material?
It's still polymer. It's still a polymer chemistry, which is coming from a different source material, but it's still polymerics. It's not a completely new invented material.
Yeah, it's just like new application and new chemistry in that respect. So obviously one of the key challenges when we're talking about novel materials and some of the, I think, controversy that can often come with that is how they fit into the system that we currently have, and how do you make sure that we have a system that can deal with these novel materials. I mean, if you're coming from the perspective that they're not that new anyway, then should the waste management system be that worried about these new materials? Or what are the issues? And Richard, do you have a view on that?
From our perspective, a lot of the time people will come to us with new materials and say, hey, I've got this fantastic new polymer or coating or whatever they're bringing to us, just to not try and name people, companies. But so often they'll bring us their samples and we'll take them to a MRF or something for testing. And the first thing we'll almost always say to them is, your product will fail. And the reason it's going to fail is because MRFs are designed to sort things firstly by size. So the first part is it has to go through the size sort, then it's sorted by shape. So if it's 2D, it goes one way. 3D another way, then it goes through optics, where it's looking for different polymers, different materials. And now on a lot of modern sites, you have AI as well, which is the next final stage where it's looking at the shape and image recognition. And a lot of the time they're looking for the materials that they know exist. So they're looking for the PET bottles, the PP, the HDPE, they're looking for some fibers, they're looking for aluminium, they're looking for steel cans. So when you have something new coming along and it's never that the site's never seen before, what ideally you're testing for is that it's just going to sail through and come out the other end, which at the end of the day is essentially contamination. But we always say to people, because they'll then come to us and say, well, if it's going to fail, why bother to test it? But the theory is that once it's gone through and it's failed, which is the best case scenario, you don't want, like, say you have a cellulose-based bottle coming through or a PLA bottle coming through, you don't want it to go into PET or into PP. You want it to go through into its own system. But at RECOUP, we can then take them aside and test them with our infrared analysis, and we can look at how they're detected and if they then have their own signatures, which most of the time they do. And then it's a case of you can then go to your Tomras, your Palenks, your Machine X, or your NRTs, and then say, okay, we've got this new material. Can you detect this? Can you sort it? Almost every time they'll nearly always say yes. But then you have to then factor in who's going to actually want to sort this material, because the next thing is we have all these people coming along with all these novel materials and they say, okay, I've designed this material, it's great, we've done all this testing, we've got it on the market, now we need to work out how much of it we need to go through the MRF before they'll sort it. But then the issue there is they've got this new material, the MRF's going to look at it and say, okay, so I've got 3% of my stream is this, who's going to buy it from me? And if no one's going to buy it and it attracts a gate fee, they're just going to send it to the path of least resistance, which means it's going to be incinerated. Yeah. So the biggest pitfall for us when it comes to novel materials is always the end market. If there's no end market that exists, exactly, to take the material away, then that's where the investment needs to be.
And that's where the circular economic model breaks down, because circular economics means you design as a circle. You have to think about the whole thing as a circle day one. So if you've got a brand new material, let's say my definition being a hybrid, you've got to start by asking the question that Richard's just highlighted is, will this come round and be usable when it's finished? And if you can't see that full chain connected, you've either got to design it to go with the material or you don't do it. It's as simple as that, because we're trying to solve one problem here and forgetting about all the other problems that come as a consequence of solving that one problem there. So you think about litter, the ever big discussion around litter. How are we going to solve the litter problem? The litter problem is not the packaging. The litter problem is the way in which human beings interact with packaging out on the street. We haven't solved the interaction that the customer has with that being a piece of waste as soon as they've eaten or used what's in it. How do we incentivize the customer to keep hold of it and do something with it? And it's the same with the materials. If I've got a brand new material and I want to put it through the system and I want to encourage one of the big supermarkets to use it, show how it will fit the whole chain. And I think largely we're working with, particularly with the waste industry, an industry that is about 7 or 8 years behind the packaging industry all the time. It's always going to be behind because of the amount of money that's needed and the amount of investment that has to go into site and into. I was once told by a manager of a WAF, it's not actually the machinery it's the problem, it's the conveyors. I have to find bigger sheds to put conveyors in if I want new materials to go through the shed. And that simply isn't possible. So we deal with what we've got. And as you say, you introduce a brand new material, they're just going to go, that is a contaminant. Sorry.
But aren't we therefore then just designing for a system that is constantly 8 years behind? So how do we match future-proofing and ambition and innovation when essentially we're designing for worst-in-class facilities that can't handle new innovation? I understand the point of there isn't an end market for it, then you shouldn't design it. But if there could be an end market, but the thing that's getting in the way is poor sorting capabilities or poor reprocessing capabilities, then we're sort of in a chicken and egg situation. And why does that fundamentally always come down to design?
Well, then we shouldn't be reacting to every kind of what's the word I'm looking for here? But this idea of that, this is bad, therefore we must redesign it. Think about the multi-layer materials. largely have been designed out now to make them monomers, which is making it a lot easier for a plastics recycling facility, if they're still around, to do something with them. So designing out the problem is, if you like, a new material. We're having monomers doing what barriers did 10, 15 years ago. So you can design to that system with existing technologies. I think the reason that some of these, and I'm thinking some of the plastic materials that have been developed, the natural materials, they've been designed because we have inundated with the press saying there's a problem with plastic in human beings. There's a plastic in the environment. It's contaminating us, it's poisoning us. Now, the evidence is still not fully complete on that. Nonetheless, everybody's reacted to it. Retailers and brands have all reacted to it, and we're expected to do something about it. So everybody goes rushing off to try and make these new materials to compensate from that news story without double checking the facts. And all too often that the knee jerk is the problem, and you find it slowly winding back up. I think we have probably gone too far with our obsession with plastic. What we haven't gone too far with is obsession with keeping that material in the system. That we have done that with metal, we've done it with glass, done it to a large extent with cardboard. Somehow along the way we forgot that plastic's just as valuable to do something with, and we've slowly losing we've lost the battle really in retaining that material in the system.
So ultimately then, when we're looking at these products going through that aren't working and they're failing at the end, and we're looking at a class of recycling and waste management systems that are, like you said, 7 to 8 years behind, should we be focusing on retrofitting design, constantly redesigning, which manufacturers are doing? Obviously, there's good work with turning multi-layer into monomers, and there's other design activities that are constantly at play within manufacturers. But should we be talking about retrofitting, reprocessing, and MRFs, or should we be taking a more radical approach and seeking to reinvent the system? Richard, what do you think?
In terms of the system, often what we've been seeing when we go to a lot of MRFs now is when DRS comes in, potentially there's going to be lines that would have been sorting PET bottles or aluminium cans that are going to be largely potentially empty. There's DRS lines are still going to need sorting, so somewhere someone's going to need to sort PET bottles, etc. But if you've already got these lines that have all of this equipment there, for example, one MRF we visit was kitted out 15 to 20 years ago for largely newspapers and different types. They've got 3 different fibre lines. 2 of those fibre lines are not operational. So already there are MRFs that have lines that aren't doing anything. So could they be retrofitted to then, have the updated software to sort these materials into different streams? Mm. And then some MRFs we talked to as well, they're already moving to a mixed plastics model where they're just sorting all plastics together and then sending them off to a PERF for further sorting, which essentially means you have less lines. So is it a case of you don't really need to reinvent the wheel or rebuild an entire site, because it's quite awkward sometimes to try and lift out bits of kit there because they're built into a massive web. So if you want to take something out of the middle, it's really complicated. But if the system's already there and they have all the equipment and you just need to do some upgrades to the system, there's potential that if you've got a novel material coming through and it can go down this line and get sent into a bunker and bailed, to then, if the system's already there, why not? But the issue tends to be, if you take Sherborne for an example, I think they first started thinking about that in 2016 and it opened in, I think, 2024. So there's nearly 10 years, or like you say, 8 years in designing a site. So is it essentially out of date by the time it opens? Mm-hmm. Or how much flexibility is there in what equipment they're putting in?
Good point.
But to use Sherborne as an example in terms of materials and the value, they had an extra line installed, which I believe they were going to use for cartons. But because they were struggling to offload their cartons, so I believe in an earlier episode of this, they were talking about Ace UK had OPRL, and it's one thing we disagree with OPRL when they put logos on cartons, is that everywhere we go, no one's separating cartons by choice. it's often a case of they've got the aseptic cartons going into aluminium. Aluminium doesn't want them, so they take them out, bag them up, and then send them off. Sherborne has the capability and has the line to separate the cartons as their own independent stream, but they're struggling to sell them. So it's a case of people are screaming out saying, we can take this material, we can do stuff with it, but there's a disconnect somewhere between, and whether it's, ACE are saying, we want you to pay us X amount, and the MRFs are saying, well, actually, we can do it cheaper if we send it that way. So, like I said, it's the path of least resistance. So when you have all of these lines, it's not necessarily, do you have the line that can sort it? It's more of a case of, is the market there for it to go to? But if you're looking at redesigning MRFs, you're looking at 50 to 100 million to build a new site, which, as you say, potentially might be out of date by the time it's built.
There's so little profit in it as well. That's the problem. So by the time all the truck movements and everything else have gone on, there's so little margin. It's the same with fibre-based composites. And I have to say something about that, is that we know that theoretically most of the big pulpers can do something with it, but anything above 10% contamination is profit gone. So they need to keep that contamination to an absolute minimum, which is restricting the recycling of a large chunk of material that's out there doing a very good job. And I think, we've seen fiberization on the increase because of the plastics lobby. Everybody wants cardboard, but they want the cardboard to do a similar job to the thing that the plastic did. So you've got to put a bit of plastic in there to give a bit of a barrier and some food safety. And yet now we can't do anything with it where we could have done something with the plastic. And we can't do anything with it because essentially nobody wants it, because they're focusing on the fibre bit, and that plastic is seen as a contaminant, not as another profit stream. And okay, at a few grams, it's not a profit stream.
No, and there's also the argument that, if you've got a 10% coated piece of board, then 10% loss on that product, but 10% might not be astronomical if you're then being able to recycle a larger quantities of fibre products. You're still getting that additional fibre, which might offset it. But if we're then fundamentally this discussion about what is the future of sustainable packaging, that ultimately comes down to, from what you're both saying, is the creation of an end market, which feels kind of impossible.
Yeah, but while you've got virgin materials that are always going to be cheaper than the recycled version of it, you are always going to get a bias towards the virgin material. Of course you are. It's much easier, as we've talked before about oil being, naphtha and the chemicals going into making polyethylene. That's almost a waste product.
Yeah.
So it's making more profit for the oil company from something they'd normally throw away. So why would they not keep wanting to flog you virgin polyethylene?
Okay, so from both of you, three things that would help us to solve that problem.
I think finding I'm going to use the word czar. You need to find a person or persons within your organization who have an expertise in all the steps along the supply chain, so you can actually look at how it all joins up, so that you can see where profit can be made earlier on, so you can start building it into your circular model. That's the difficulty, is that packaging technologies only go as far as the finished product packaging, which then goes to the retailer, who takes another view about what that packaging is doing. That then goes to a waste stream that takes another view. They see the packaging in a completely different form, and then you get the reprocessor who sees it in another completely different form. Each of them have different views about what that packaging is doing. Oh, we forgot the consumer as well, because the consumer is seeing it as absolutely a priority. Particularly if it's a food product, I would not touch this food unless it was in a piece of packaging. As soon as they've touched the food, this packaging is now a problem. Somebody else's problem, not mine. So you somehow got to join all those bits up, and I don't know whether it's a single person or department or something, but somebody who really thinks the circular economic design model, so can see how it all joins up and build it in from the beginning of the design. Professor Sophie Thomas, waste is a design issue. It's not a waste issue, it's a design issue.
Do you agree with that, Richard?
Definitely. Yeah, we always say the end of life starts at design. if you're not thinking about what's going to happen at the end of life, so when we do all our training courses for RECOUP, one of the things we always say is start with the design guidance, and our design guidance always starts with the reprocessor in mind. So we're asking them, what can you handle, what can you recycle, what can you do with it, etc. And then you work your way back. So there's never going to be the perfect design. So you can't look at it and say, okay, that's perfect, because if you did, that's literally just a PET bottle with absolutely nothing else. Just a complete monomaterial. The second you put any adhesives or labels and things like that on there, but that's when testing becomes crucial, because then you're working out what adhesives you can use, how the inks react, whether the label impacts the detection, things such as that, which is where testing is crucial. But then obviously a lot of the time people are going through a paper trail to work out whether things are suitable for recycling or not. And one of the biggest mistakes we're seeing a lot of people making at the moment is they'll take the RAM and think it's a design tool, which the issue we have with that is they try to simplify as much as possible, that there are so many things currently in the RAM that appear to be green, so they attract lower fees, but in our guidance or CFlex guidance or CPI guidance they would be red. And the issue we have when we're talking to people is that, okay, so if you've made that change via the RAM, at some point the RAM is going to change and it's going to align with the guidance. It's not going to be the other way around. So already the guidance is there for people to design packaging that is fully recyclable. Just because the RAM's coming up, the RAM are technically, from my point of view, is for the finance team to work out the taxes, and the design guidance. Not to just plug the RECOUP guidance, because there's guidance you can use, Reciclass guidance, like I say, CFlex guidance. It's all out there and it's been worked on for years and honed and adjusted and changed. So it's not perfect, but it's there and it's a tool for design. And if you're using that as your design source from the start, you're if you're making it as green as possible, then you're not going to have problems with the RAM. It should, in theory, work its way through the system.
When you say green, you're not using green in terms of a sustainability claim.
Oh, yeah.
No greenwashing claims here. Only RAM guidance.
RAM guidance only.
RAM reading only. But to come back to an earlier point that I made, yes, there's some fantastic guidance out there, and it does start with design. And I think, as a manufacturer as well, all of our packaging starts with design. You make trade-offs along the way, maybe, when we start talking about longer shelf life products or dealing with other issues. But fundamentally, where I struggle, I think, is where we're dealing with situations where that design guidance is made with the lowest denominator in mind and lacks that ambition piece. Because there needs to be greater investment in, all we want is to see finance from EPR to go into reprocessors and go into mills and go into the end, to help to create that end market. So there is, how do we get over this constant tug between the guidelines are made for the current stock, but the current stock is not necessarily as ambitious as it could be. So how do we close that gap?
I think that the ambition, it depends what your ambition is. Are we, if you go cast your mind back to the 90s, it was all brand. Everything was about brand. And packaging was used to promote the brand. Goodness, I worked on Toilet Duck. Toilet Duck had the squiggly neck, and it was there to show that you put it under the rim. It was a piece of packaging designed to show the consumer how to use. Think about the Pringles tin, which was absolutely heralded as a masterpiece in brilliant piece of packaging until about 5 years ago. So packaging has actually supported big brands along the way really, really well. The ambition, I think, is for brands to go, right, how do we show the consumer we're working with them? The whole framework around packaging has changed. The way we're delivering packaging to people's houses has changed. Think about Amazon. Everything's coming in a brown paper bag right now. Huge numbers of transactions are done that way. When you think about Ocado or Sainsbury's or Tesco delivering to the door, it comes in a green crate. The primary delivery is a green crate. It isn't necessarily the packaging inside. You're trusting the brand name now a lot more than just the packaging shape. So have we moved to an era where it doesn't necessarily matter? Well, I don't think it does with the consumer. I don't think they care what the packaging is made of. What they care about is how easily it is to dispose of. And therefore, the ease of disposal is perhaps down to the brand to say, okay, we just have to make sure that it is the easiest thing to do. And, it goes in that bin and it will go off and it will be processed. And somewhere along the track, somebody's going to make some money out of reprocessing it. Are we being too fussy about that? And should we be returning maybe to plastic, but closing the loop on it so that we know that that plastic doesn't stray into the environment and it does come back around the system? Plastic's very good for that. It's just that we've kind of, as I said earlier, we've kind of lost the impact of how important plastic is as a material, and we've abandoned it and gone, we go off and do fibre. We must go and do something else. We must invent a brand new polymer out of something that isn't fossil. Well, if we can keep the plastic in circulation and we can do something with it, and it's a closed loop as it can be, so we can perhaps talk about refill along those lines. If that closed loop is actually made really effective, are we so wrong to be using plastic instead of other materials? Bear in mind, the plastic carrier bag was invented because we were cutting down too many trees. The guy I think it was in Finland or Sweden anyway, he invented a plastic carrier bag so people could keep it in their pocket and go shopping. And then suddenly we decided that we were going to make that a throwaway single-use piece, and that's where the problem lay. And it's actually down to people, not the material.
So how do we marry up consumer behaviour with a future moving sustainable packaging?
Yeah, that's a very, very long. Yeah, I don't know how.
Too far down the road of consumer insights, but from the perspective of consumers have opinions, those trends are definitely having knock-on effects within the packaging industry, like paperization. But then we're also seeing things like the RAM cause problems with the glass industry, for example, and SMEs with niche products having massive problems with being able to price their glass containers appropriately, and then that's pushing into plastic, into fibre, into other materials. And so really, should we really be getting back into a conversation about, is it plastic, is it not plastic, or is that also just looking backwards and not looking forwards enough? Either of you can answer the question. I know you're both very invested in plastic industries, which is an interesting one, I think, to acknowledge whilst we have this discussion, which is that
I think looking forward, I think I'm a great believer in small is beautiful. Okay, so that whole area about going big, building a big MRF, building a big perf, building a big plastic recycler. You've got to feed that animal. You've got to keep putting stuff into it. If you build at that scale, of course, you're likely to fail because you've got to rely on the consumer doing their bit in that circle. If you take the Small is Beautiful book written by E.F. Schumacher back in, I think, probably the 70s now, the idea is invest in the people. So, as an example, in my local area, they're talking about putting in a humongous great solar farm in, and the local environmental group is saying, why are we doing it on this massive scale when we could actually put smaller units around each of the towns in the locality and feed directly into the town, and then give the town some slice of the action and get them involved in it. So the local maintenance could be done by the local electrician company. It doesn't have to be done by the megalithic company that's actually doing it. And insulate the money from it is probably going to go out of the country anyway. So why don't we make sure the money returns to the local community? You could do that. I'm fairly sure you could do it with waste industry. There's a very, very good example of it, actually. There's a company called, a very funny name for a waste company, Crapper, down in Swindon, and they've been doing landfill for years and years and years. They're now doing anaerobic digestion, but they are looking and they're proposing to put inflatable CO2 greenhouses on top of the landfill, where they're taking the methane from the landfill to drive motors that generate electricity for the hydroponics in the greenhouses. The greenhouses then take the CO2 off the engines into the greenhouse, which actually promotes growth of the product inside the greenhouse. And I think that's a fantastic thing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And that's a local initiative. That's Swindon area, If we can have more of those types of projects, I think then you start going, okay, well, how do we feed that? local waste. We're going to keep that to ourselves, you know.
I mean, that's basically an onshoring conversation, isn't it? So if we're looking at this whole system and we're watching materials go through that then don't work in current stock, and then half of that is exported anyway, in terms of revolutionizing the future of packaging in this country, is onshoring all of our waste processing critical to that?
Yep.
Richard, what do you think?
Well, I think bringing it back around the consumer and keeping it as simple as possible in terms of what we expect them to do. It's a case of, we often have this quote in a lot of our reports from RECOUP, is that you can't pass the responsibility of recycling onto the consumer. So you can't expect the consumer is going to adjust or manipulate the packaging. So you need to make it as simple as possible so the consumer knows I can put this in my bin and it's going to go somewhere. And I think an example that I saw on LinkedIn a couple of days ago was, not to try and pick on people, but the FrugalPack bottle, which essentially it's a bag in a box, but it's shaped like a bottle. So you have, and they have done a lot of work on, because originally it was a metallized pouch inside the cardboard, whereas I think now it's just a clear pouch. So they've made the pouch better. The pouch is now optimally recyclable. If it's a clear pouch, then it's going to go to somewhere like Amcor or someone and they'll recycle it. However, how many consumers are going to take that pouch out of the cardboard, or they're just going to put it straight in the bin? So then you've got the issue of this FrugalPack bottle is going to go to the MRF, and potentially we've had issues as well where we've done trials on other fibre-based bottles or products and the issue is they're not flat. So because they sort by 2D, 3D, they end up going into the 3D stream, so then they're not even going to the paper stream. So if you separate the outside and the inside, the outside, because you have the cap, is going to go to 3D because it has the cap, so it's heavy and it's going to end up so it's even not going to go to flexible for recycling if you put it in your bin. So the issue there is, then do you need the consumer to cut the top off, and then the top's too small, so then it gets lost in fines. So when you look at the design, could you have just had a glass bottle? Could you have just had a plastic bottle? Because they have streams that work. So are you trying to redesign something for a stream and then in effect breaking it, making it harder for the consumer rather than making it easy for them?
Yeah, and that's because everybody's been sold this untruth about plastic being really evil, and therefore they're trying to reduce the amount of plastic that's out there and the dependence on fossil. We have seen how dependent we are on fossil and the dangers inherent in the Straits of Hormuz. The world is coming to a very, very critical point because we're not using the fossil. What we do is squander that resource. That's why we have the problem. If we were really valuing that material in the first place, we would have actually by now figured out a good way of recycling it and reusing it. And we've just squandered it because it's so cheap to do.
Well, is it that we haven't found it, or is it that there hasn't been the investment?
It's not been an investment. There's plenty of ways of doing it.
We know how to do it.
Yes, mechanical recovery. There's chemical recovery. The oil companies could recover it from the chemical recycling process. It can be done. It's just there's no money in it, and that comes down to the point you've made. Is there's no money in it, nobody's interested.
So does it come down then to a greater question about efficiency and efficacy? So we mentioned it earlier, but AI and robotics, bringing that, if we're not going to be tearing down MRFs and rebuilding them, but we're retrofitting, we're looking at new ways of maybe bringing in different lines. So then do we then put our reliance more wholeheartedly into robotics in terms of robotic arm sorting, or AI in terms of visual identification systems?
Well, it's a very unpleasant job. That's all I'm saying, working on a recycling line, and machines can be made to do it a lot better. You think about the ballistic separators and things. They did quite a good job. You think about the air jet separators, they do quite a good job. Robots do quite a good job. I think with the advent of things like Grey Parrot, which is visual recognition, I think probably within the next 5 years you will have fully automated sorting. It still comes down to, we've now sorted it into 500 fractions rather than 50. What do we do? What do we do with this? We've got a big box there of that and a big box of that. Who's going to take it and do something with it? That's the other piece, and that really is the bit that I don't know what they call it now. It used to be called BEES. What's the Department of Industry and Science?
Energy and net zero, isn't it?
Yeah.
Science and technology, and split into three.
So why are they not talking to DEFRA? Why are they not saying, how can we start small businesses around Britain that use this material to do this, this and this? Bury, for instance, for years have been taking a lot of this material and making plastic lumber, which we see in every park in the country. But as Mike says at Bury, we can only make so many benches before we run out of things to do. We should be looking at how that material can be maximised and used back in our own industry, the packaging industry. And that can be done through chemical recycling. The trouble is we've gone about those chemical recycling models with this sort of, how do we make it make money at this scale, where we should be looking at how do we make money at this scale, small, local. And I think going back to recycling technologies, the philosophy was absolutely right with them. They said local, 2 containers on a MRF, they can actually do the conversion of plastic. They can turn it back into, what was the oil called they used to use that came out of that process? Anyway, they create the drums of oil and then they sell it on the open market. And that would be the MRF doing it. So it was a profit line for the MRF. But they never actually worked out how the back end was going to work. And that's where it all came unstuck, really. There was not enough money being made from it to fund the front bit of building the machine.
So we need not just better joined up thinking within design, but also joined up thinking within the physical operations of these systems as well.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
So then, Richard, is AI and robotics just a patch for redesign and for investment and for reinventing that system, or are they actually an effective element that isn't just going to provide more fragmented collections of products that still don't have an end market to go to?
So there's a lot of different ways in which AI is being implemented. I mean, one of the things, I don't know if it happens to many people when they go shopping, but I was in other supermarkets are available, but I was in Tesco's at the weekend and I went to scan some carrots and there was like we've got on here, a nice little QR code right next to the barcode, and I accidentally scanned the QR code, which then came back with that this isn't recognised. But not to, give them too much publicity, but you've got Alice Radcliffe from Polytags going around LinkedIn a lot at the moment saying, look, here's this QR code and we've got it on our products. You take it to the till at Tesco's, you scan it, and it recognises it as a regular barcode. So what we're seeing is instead of having a QR code and a barcode, you can have just a QR code, and the QR code can be different things for different people. So as an example of where it's being used in reuse, if you go to somewhere like Derby County, which I know is where it was being used, if you're a consumer and you scan the QR code on your cup for your beer or your Coke or whatever you're drinking, it will tell you about the event you're at. So it will tell you you're at Derby County Football Stadium, what game you're at. It might even tell you how many times the cup you're drinking from has been washed. If you're Derby County, you can scan that bottle or cup, and you'll know how many times you've taken it out, brought it back and washed it and used it and where it's gone. Then if you're the company that's providing that, you can scan the same QR code and you know exactly where it's been, and that gives it traceability, which means essentially you could have this cup that's only gone to one side, it's been circulating around this side for several months, then you've got it back. You can then recycle that as a food grade product because you've got full traceability of where that's been.
Absolutely.
Which at the moment isn't widely available, but then you have the AI being used at sites like Amcor at Leamington Spa, where they'll use their AI to scan the bottles as they're going through the system. So they'll look for white or clear PP trays, or they're looking at HDPE there, so they're looking at PE trays, PE bottles. And if they're white or clear, they know they can get a good grade of plastic from there for reuse. So they'll then take them away, put them through a hot wash system, and then put them back into food grade products. Whereas at the moment, without AI, that's not really possible, because for all you know, you could have a PE or PP bottle that's been used for pesticides or chemicals that you don't really want going anywhere near food grade. So there is scope where, you can have the QR code system where you can, like I say, QR codes different things for different people. So it's going through the MRF scans that and it knows what it is. So it knows this is food grade, directs it to food grade. So you can have all these different systems where they work together. So there's no one fix. But all the systems together, they can complement and
goes on to litter bins as well. You can have smart litter bins, so you can be incentivized for putting it in the litter bin, where you actually, the QR code is read as you put it into the bin. So thinking about sandwich boxes, for instance, fold it flat, put it through a letterbox. It scans. I keep hitting this microphone. Scan the QR code, and it's going right. Okay, there's 5% off your next purchase because you've actually done the right thing.
Doesn't sound super scalable, that.
Talking of Polytag, we've had that conversation.
I mean, Polytag, yes, in terms. Well, I mean, you then go into questions about costs and how scalable can that be, and how do you incentivize that? I mean, I think ultimately what we all want to see is obviously that good incentivization where we all want to do the right thing, and manufacturers are wanting to design, and MRFs want to sort, and reprocessors want to reprocess.
Yeah. But you can take Hubbub. Those of you who don't know Hubbub have done a lot of work with Leads by Example, for instance. Yeah. And we've got the 2-bin system down in Wimbledon at the moment, and they make collecting litter on the street, which is one of the biggest challenges of all, really, because with the new simplified recycling and the bins and everything else over the next 4 or 5 years, everybody will be doing pretty well the same thing in UK PLC, which is good, as long as people sort of do what they're doing. But it will improve the streams of material we're going to get. We still are going to have the major problem of what goes out onto the street and disappears. But Hubbub showed that you can change behaviour. I think
it's an oldie but a goodie. Their change campaigns.
Yeah, and EcoSurety with flexible packaging, which we were involved with when I was at M&S. We got that started as a collection scheme, just 3 stores with 3 collection bins. That now is across at least 30% of the stores in the UK, and it's a behaviour change. People go to the store with their flexible packaging, which will change again next year, of course, in April, when they'll put it in the bin at home.
Fingers crossed.
We hope. Yeah. But you can change behaviour, but it is not a slam dunk overnight thing. It's years and years and years of drip, 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 drip. But you have to have an ambition. You have to have a focus for what the end game is to actually get it. And that's what Hubbub are really good at. It's what EcoSurety have been really good at with the Flexible Packaging Fund, is having the end focus about what it is they're trying to achieve and just keeping at it no matter what. Incentivising along the way, actually guaranteeing a PRN, which was part of it, making sure that actually the people who were involved with it were going to get the same value every single time, even when the price dropped. So there is something about that. And I'm thinking about the recycling of, going back to our thing about fibre-based composites, if there was a model by which you incentivised that 10% that was considered waste and brought that into the system that way, then it's worth them collecting. It's those models that you need to look at, as well as just the physical material. It's financial models around it.
And ultimately, it's about not shunting responsibility up and down the supply chain, isn't it? It's how do we approach the future of sustainable packaging in a way that is truly about the entire supply chain? And I've made this motion like a line, and I'm going to turn it into a circle.
Yes, and that's what circular economics is all about.
Absolutely. And I think that's, we all sometimes have a tendency to work in our silos, and we're working on design, and then we get frustrated with this, and then other end of the supply chain gets frustrated at consumers. And ultimately, we all keep having conversations about how do we join this up, but until we have the right political incentive or maybe the right czarship.
Well, technically, theoretically, I would say, not technically. Technically, it actually exists. Theoretically, maybe we'll get to see the output. But Mary Cray's running the Circular Economic Forum. There should be some steer from DEFRA about how we should be approaching some of these conundrums. That's the hope.
And also how to depoliticize to a certain extent. So obviously reuse and refill is a very political topic right now, and that takes the top of the agenda. So it's a fantastic solution in the right place and is very exciting. But we can't put every food group and every packaged item into a reusable system yet. I mean, that requires huge social reform to be able to do that. So I guess come back to your point earlier, Richard, of that traceability piece is a really interesting one, because that where you can map and track has more data, isn't it? What people's activities are. But I'm thinking about the future of legislation and regulation like PPWR coming in, the impacts of EPR, and we have to increase percentages of food grade plastic, for example, within products. Right now it's very hard to get food grade recycled PP. But maybe if we can trace that through our systems better, we then have a sustainable packaging system that does feed more off of circular economics. And how do we drive that faster? Where does that change fundamentally need to come from, I guess, is my next question.
I think for me, when you're looking at where do you need to make the changes, it's probably from the very beginning. So going back to when you've got novel materials and we have all these companies coming to us and saying, we've got this new material, we've designed it, we've tested it, we've got it, we want to scale it and bring it to market. Where's it going to go at the end of this? And the issue we have time and time again, and it's the same thing with chemical recycling, you have something, they develop it, they scale it up, and then they disappear. And then it's the same with bio-based and compostable packaging at the moment. They're at this turning point where when you look at the EPR and the RAM, they're essentially going to be priced out of the market. They're going to struggle to actually make any difference because EPR fees are essentially going to be taken and funneled back to local authorities where they can then put that into their current infrastructure, which again is being designed around PET, HDPE, cardboard, glass, and aluminium, etc. So there's no real infrastructure being looked at for bio-based. So you have UKRI coming along saying, okay, make me some chemical recycling, make me some novel materials. Okay, here's £1 million, go and make it. So then they make it, they get it onto the market, and they're like, great, what do we do now? And UKRI like, see ya. And then these companies are then at this point where, okay, so where's my end market? Who's going to make it for me? And when you look at it, to take some examples, you've got Biffa who, they collect and recycle HDPE bottles and then they make milk bottles. You've got Plastipack and Cleantech, which collects PET bottles and then they recycle them. So these companies are essentially, they've created their own end market. But then you've got all these novel companies that they've been given the money to develop from the beginning. They haven't factored in or structured or have the income or the finances to make that end market. So it's a case of UKRI needs to step up, or someone needs to step up and say, okay, so here's the money for the start, and now we need to build the end.
Oh, this is what I was saying about joining up the DEFRA with the industry, Department of Industry. Those two need to be working in harmony because, goodness, we've got so little real industry left in our country, apart from, funnily enough, the packaging industry, which is actually quite a big industry. And we don't seem to have that spirit of saying, let's make something in the UK. And a lot of the plastic we're collecting now is going offshore as well. So it's going other places to be made into things, not here, which is tragic.
Well, it comes down to that question of is there value in waste? So do we make EPR fill in the rest of the gaps in that funding then?
Well, essentially, you've got the PRN system, which is supposed to fund reprocessors.
Yeah.
But it's how do you make that system or incentivize that system to then invest in, for example, if you've got, say, like Woodley that's making a cellulose-based plastic, the issue they've got is that they've got that on the market, but it doesn't really have the end market. So they're, you're looking where can a material like this go? You've got other materials like you've got Zampler or Morrow, Fujimoto, all these different companies that are bringing these new materials, and some of them, okay, they're lining paper, which in some respects makes it easy as long as it fits within the paper stream. Yes, okay, you still probably got that 10% waste. In some cases, they're taking that and arguably is it waste because they're using it to generate power to power their own systems. Essentially, you've got that argument, but when you're designing things and you're looking at it from that perspective, it's a case of, where's it going to go? Where's the funding going to come from to actually develop that? And like I say, at the moment, EPR and the RAM is looking at what systems are in place now rather than looking to the future. And there's no real guidance to say you must. So when you look at, you mentioned Flexible Plastic Fund, some places we're talking to or most we go to visit, a lot of the infrastructure issues we have in the UK and around why they're using bags to collect the material is that if you go to a new site like Sherborne, they're using trommels and paddles and things such as that. So there's not a lot for the plastics to wrap around. But you go to a lot of the older sites and they're using star screens and disc screens. There's a lot of rotating shafts and pulleys and things like that. And they all get wrapped up and then they have hours and hours of downtime. And every hour of downtime is worth tens of thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
So they put them in the bag so that it gets picked off right at the very start. But then you've got everything mixed together. And then you have high gate fees. So at that point, you've got the MRF looking at it saying, pay £600 plus to send it off, or pay someone £120, £130 for it to be burned for energy. So where's it going to go? Because like I said, at the end of the day, they're businesses. So really you need that kind of incentivization and that drive for someone to say, okay, councils, I need you to be looking at how you redevelop your site to make it optimized so that you can collect these materials loose.
Yeah. And again, that comes back to what we'd said about half an hour ago, which is each of the MRFs at a certain level in it. Sherborne is the newest version, and then you go back to some of them which have been around 25 years, and they're basically operating equipment that was designed for sorting road aggregate rather than actually packaging.
Yeah. So, and we come back again to we're going round in circles, which feels very fitting, but I think that's part of the, that ultimately seems to be the crux of any discussion on what the future is, because we keep going back to the same issues that we all are going round and round in circles on, which is we need to retrofit, we need new, but new becomes old very quickly. How do you genuinely future-proof? And is it that we need a much stronger, more ambitious vision for the future that has circular economics built at its centre, and that we can then be more ambitious and bring innovation there? But I guess that requires on a very strong vision and consistency in government that perhaps is not a possible thing to achieve.
Somebody needs to invent another Trabant. I don't know.
What's a Trabant?
A Trabant, Eastern German car that was built around a two-stroke engine, but it was made of basically resin-infused cardboard. So all the panels on it were actually cardboard.
Oh, cracking! Let's have that then.
So, but that's kind of what somebody needs to do, is suddenly realise that from a waste stream they can make something that is so super high-tech that now this is the desirable item everybody wants, and it drives a new marketplace. And you kind of see it in battery technology. People suddenly, it's now coming down and down and down in price because suddenly everybody's embraced it. And the trouble is that nobody sees waste as a resource; they see it as a problem, and we continue to see it as a problem. Nobody's turned it into this really exciting area. And Veolia did try to do it in their headline statement. We're a mining company, not a waste company. Mining resource. And they've, even in Belgium, you probably know that in Belgium they've actually started exploring what wealth could lie in old landfill sites. They're finding heavy metals and things in there that they can actually extract. Now that, oh wow, there's some televisions in there that have got some really good metals that we could use. The cost of getting it out is the problem, but shortly, I think, what's the statistic? There's more gold actually wrapped up in electronics now than there is ever mined. So it's all out there. It's just, where's the incentive to get it? Interestingly, third world countries are the ones that are being exploited to actually extract this stuff. So that's where we're sending all our waste. We're sending it to third world countries where it's cheap and we get away with some nefarious practices.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's some international drill up thinking that I think needs to take place. Okay, well, just one final question to you both to just wrap this all up, which is one thing you are excited about for the future of sustainable packaging. Richard. Gosh, guys, one thing. What are we excited about? What's a good? What do you envision as the future? What's coming that you feel that we should be aspiring towards, that we should be excited about, that we should be striving towards to be able to make a difference for sustainable packaging going forward?
I've got the one thing that's really been exciting, and this whole process for the last 6 years, as that the industry circle is talking.
Yeah, that is true.
6 to 8 years ago, we would never have spoken to a waste company. We wouldn't have even considered what happened to the waste, well, maybe 10 years ago, longer than that, maybe, because Plan A was doing a lot of it. So let's say 13 years ago. But we weren't talking as a whole. And for the last decade, certainly, we have talked as a whole. We sit down, we talk to waste guys in the same room as the guys who are designing. The only thing we haven't done is gone up to agency level. and got the agencies involved, you know, the design companies to come into this, the branding companies to come into this. And I think also, maybe for me, the exciting thing is we're just seeing the glimmers of proper marketing practice being brought to bear upon proper circular economic models, where marketers have suddenly gone, no, this fundamentally, we could make a difference to our business doing this. And so that for me would be the exciting thing, is seeing how brands start to embrace circularity truly and bringing it into their business models.
Which comes nicely to your point earlier about the toilet duct shape, and also the QR codes in terms of finding out more information about that company. And maybe we're moving away, whilst there seems to be a lot of print and strong colours out on the market, coming back into branding, maybe it's going deeper into the materials, and maybe through things like QR codes and being able to understand what the product is, where it's come from, and what who the company is. Maybe through that we create greater value into the piece of packaging that we...
And loyalty to the brand, which is what it's all about, really.
Which it all comes down to, and that is to protect and preserve, and also really good marketing for your company. Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much both for your time today. It's been a really good discussion. We've talked about,
Talia.
Joining the system, bringing it together, I think that final point is really salient about how we join up the system and make sure that we all keep talking. I think you're right that when we used to work in silos, we're now all trying to talk to each other a lot more. So we just need to keep ramping that up and seek greater investment and helping to maybe incentivize and join that system together. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.